The coaster renaissance of the 1970s and 80s ignited an explosion of coaster building and innovation not seen since the Roaring '20s. While designers like John C. Allen and Charles Dinn restored the image of the wooden coaster, amusement firms like Aerodynamics and Schwarzkopf developed groundbreaking steel coaster technology that revolutionized the industry. This age of innovation continued into the 90s and the new millennium, where ride manufacturers and theme park chains competed to build the biggest, baddest, and most statistically spectacular roller coaster. And just like with the coaster renaissance, many point to a single coaster as the harbinger of this new era. A record-breaking ride that shocked the world and inspired the next phase of coaster history, the Coaster Wars. Chapter 1: The Hypercoaster Crusade. In 1988, Dick Kinzel, the president of the entertainment company Cedar Fair, saw a news report on the opening of a new coaster in Japan named Bandit. Constructed at Yomiuri-land by the Japanese manufacturing firm Togo, the ride's layout focused on height and speed and was completely devoid of inversions, unlike many of the steel coasters opening in America at that time. Mr. Kinzel wanted a similar ride for his company's flagship park, Cedar Point, and approached leading steel coaster maker Aerodynamics about the concept. Ron Toomer, Arrow's head coaster designer, originally drew up plans for a 187-foot tall coaster, but the plans were quickly modified to allow the ride to break the 200-foot barrier, a statistic that was much more impressive for marketing. Opening in 1989, Magnum XL 200 became the world's first hypercoaster, a term used to describe a full-circuit roller coaster standing at least 200 feet tall. Those extra 13 feet really paid off. Whether Mr. Kinzel actually needed Magnum's larger size or just thought he did, the coaster drew in record crowds for Cedar Point. Magnum was a massive success, a record-breaking, non-inverting steel coaster with a layout that mimics the airtime-filled experience of traditional out-and-back wooden coasters. It's often cited as the coaster that started the Coaster Wars, a period of time when amusement parks competed with one another to build the tallest, fastest, and most record-breaking coaster. Despite their expense to build, the high marketability of hypercoasters paid off, and Arrow was soon in demand for more than just their looping and suspended coasters. In 1991, Kennywood in West Mifflin, Pennsylvania, opened the Arrow-built Steel Phantom. While the ride wasn't taller than Magnum, standing a mere 160 feet tall, the ride's second drop plunged 225 feet into a ravine, causing it to claim the title of the world's biggest drop, and, with a top speed of 85 miles per hour, world's fastest roller coaster. Steel Phantom was a Frankensteinian take on the hyper concept, a ride stuck between two coaster movements. Its layout emphasized drops in speed like Magnum, but also featured elements found on traditional Arrow Mega Loopers. The result was a rather uncomfortable ride experience. The ride's high speed led to extreme roughness through its inversions and transitions. Rumor has it, ride operators made guests remove their earrings before riding due to the excessive headbanging from the over-the-shoulder restraints. And with the general decline in headbanging interest following the end of the 80s, even Metallica bassist Cliff Burton reported that it hurt his neck. Most of the hypercoasters that followed Steel Phantom were inversionless and featured lap bars like Magnum. 1994 saw the construction of 3 Arrow hypermodels. The first, Titan at Space World in Fukuoka, Japan, wasn't technically a hypercoaster, standing 166 feet tall with a drop of 176 feet, but its layout and trains were unmistakably hyper-esque. The other 2 were very much hypers, and both broke records. The big one at England's Blackpool Pleasure Beach opened as the world's tallest coaster at 213 feet, while Desperado at Nevada's Buffalo Bills Resort and Casino equaled Steel Phantom's record for the world's tallest drop at 225 feet, which it achieved by dropping into an underground tunnel. With the hypercoaster's popularity growing, other manufacturers soon jumped on the bandwagon. The first to do so was D.H. Morgan Manufacturing, an American manufacturer founded by Dana Morgan, the son of Arrow co-founder Ed Morgan, who opened Valley Fair's Wild Thing in 1996. While Dana Morgan had been involved in the amusement industry for many years prior to Wild Thing was his company's first roller coaster to open to the public, which is incredibly impressive considering it's a 207-foot hyper. Morgan went on to build 3 more of these hypercoaster models before the year 2000, Dorney Park's Steel Force, Worlds of Fun's Mamba, and SeaWorld San Antonio's Steel Eel. Togo, the company whose Bandit inspired the Hyper Wars in the first place, entered the hypercoaster scene in a big way in 1996 with Fuji-Q Highland's Fujiyama. Translating to King of Coasters and standing an insane 259 feet tall, the ride broke the big one's height record by 46 feet, while also overtaking Desperado and Steel Phantom for the world's tallest drop. Incredibly, just 8 years after Magnum, the industry was already knocking on the next height barrier. A full circuit coaster over 300 feet was within reach. But before we get there, we need to back up a bit. While the hypercoaster craze was in full swing, a certain coaster-creating duo was also making a huge impact on the amusement industry, forever changing the skylines of parks around the world. Chapter 2: Bolliger, Mabillard, and Batman. Fans of the series probably remember the story behind the 1986 stand-up coaster Shockwave at Six Flags Magic Mountain. While built by Intamin, the ride was designed by a couple of guys at a Swiss firm named Giovanola. Their names were Walter Bolliger and Claude Mabillard, and 1 year later, the two designers decided to leave the company and form their own, creatively named Bolliger and Mabillard, or B&M for short. Despite vowing not to make any more amusement attractions, the duo was soon approached by Six Flags Great America to design and build a new stand-up coaster similar to Magic Mountain's Shockwave, a project which they accepted. They continued to play it safe with their naming strategy, using the tried and true coaster naming format of metal type plus cool animal or weather event, and the result was Iron Wolf, a stand-up coaster featuring the same box track and 4-across train design developed by the pair when they worked at Giovanola, features that would go on to be synonymous with B&M coasters. While Iron Wolf and the rest of B&M's early stand-ups were well received, B&M really turned heads in 1992 when they debuted a radical new coaster at Six Flags Great America named Batman the Ride. Luckily, this one pretty much named itself, which might be why they took on the project. Unlike a traditional looping coaster, the trains on Batman are positioned under the track, allowing riders' legs and feet to dangle in midair. And unlike our suspended coaster, where the cars are able to freely swing around turns, B&M's inverted coaster trains have seats that are directly attached to the wheel carriage, allowing them to be firmly locked in place as the train navigates its layout. This train design allows for layouts with inversions, and B&M didn't hold back in this regard. Batman featured 5, including 2 vertical loops, 2 incredibly tight corkscrew-like inversions called wingovers, and the world's first zero-G roll, a combination of a heartline roll and an airtime hill that astounded both the general public and coaster enthusiasts alike. Keep in mind that at the time, most looping coasters looked like this, with cookie-cutter loop and corkscrew pieces. Batman the Ride stood out, from its train design to its precisely engineered layout, as a truly modern thrill coaster. The ride was so successful, Six Flags and then parent company Time Warner decided to clone the ride, with the goal to install a Batman model at every Six Flags park. To this day, 12 Batman clones have been built at parks in North America, Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. Chapter 3: Other manufacturers try to keep up. After Batman's opening, B&M became the most in-demand coaster manufacturer in the world. While every park wanted a piece of the pie, B&M was still a young, small company and could only work on so many rides each year. So when Busch Gardens approached B&M in the early 90s, asking them to design and build 2 sit-down looping coasters for their parks in Virginia and Florida, B&M was simply unable to do so. The two parties did reach a compromise. B&M agreed to design and build just 1 coaster for Busch Gardens Tampa, while the management at Busch Gardens Williamsburg was tasked with finding a different manufacturer. The choice was pretty easy for Busch Gardens Williamsburg. Their 2-star coasters were built by the same manufacturer, Aerodynamics, so why not make it 3 for 3? Busch Gardens Williamsburg wanted Aero to deliver a modern looping coaster, something that would stand apart from Loch Ness Monster. Aero offered to build them a mega looper like Six Flags Magic Mountain's Viper, but Busch Gardens wasn't interested in a ride containing Aero's cookie-cutter track pieces. They wanted a ride with unique, one-of-a-kind inversions and a modern, free-floating support structure. The result was Drakenfire, perhaps the most infamous steel coaster ever built. While the ride did feature a unique inverting first drop and more modern free-floating supports, the ride also featured unbearable roughness through its more extreme transitions. The issues stemmed to Aero's archaic coaster design process. While they did use computers to aid in the ride's design for G-force calculations, Aero stuck to their trusty tangent radius track design method, where instead of allowing curves to smoothly change radii constantly, like on B&M coasters, Arrow built curves with consistent radii which were connected by tangent lines, resulting in phenomenally jerky transitions between track sections. El Toro Orion goes into incredible detail on tangent radius design in his Dragonfire Problematic Coasters video, linked in the description. Meanwhile, B&M went to the drawing board and designed Kumba for Busch Gardens Tampa Bay, a groundbreaking looping coaster with 7 inversions, including the world's tallest vertical loop, which also happened to wrap around the ride's lift hill, North America's first dive loop, a zero-G roll, and the world's first pair of interlocking corkscrews, all taken at high speed and with extreme smoothness, making for an intense yet comfortable ride experience. It was a feat of engineering never before seen on a sit-down looping coaster. Many enthusiasts at the time considered it one of, if not the best steel roller coaster in the world. Up north, Dragonfire developed the opposite reputation, and quickly began to suffer from low ridership. This, coupled with high maintenance costs, led to its indefinite closure in 1998. It was eventually scrapped in 2002. While Arrow continued to see success in the hypercoaster and family coaster market in this era, the Dragonfire fiasco proved that they weren't the king of the looping coaster anymore, and would be a full 7 years before they installed another major looper. It wouldn't be long before other companies tried to replicate B&M's success. The most notable is everyone's favorite Dutch manufacturer, Vekoma. 2 years after Batman the Ride, Vekoma debuted their own inverted coaster model, what they called their suspended looping coaster model, or SLC for short. The prototype SLC was Condor at Walibi Holland, and while it didn't exactly offer the most comfortable ride experience in the world, its eye-catching layout and undeniable thrills made it a hit. SLCs began to pop up all over the world, as its cheaper price tag made it an attractive option for many smaller and medium-sized parks who didn't have the cash for a B&M. While a few custom layouts were built, most SLCs are clones or near clones of Walibi Belgium's Condor. The makers of the Boomerang had another hit model on their hands. Meanwhile, B&M was pushing the envelope with their stand-up, sit-down, and inverted coasters, with parks taking turns breaking each other's records for each category. Cedar Point was the first park to receive a supersized invert with Raptor in 1994, which opened as the world's tallest and fastest inverted coaster. 2 years later, Busch Gardens Tampa opened Montu, a massive invert that took the height and speed crown from Raptor, standing 150 feet tall and hitting a top speed of 60 miles per hour. 1 year after that, Busch Gardens Williamsburg finally got their overdue B&M with Alpengeist, a truly monstrous invert with a 195-foot tall lift hill, still standing today as the world's tallest full-circuit inverted coaster. While not as popular as their inverted coaster model, B&M stand-up saw a similar trajectory. Cedar Point opened Mantis in 1996, which stood as the tallest stand-up coaster in the world at 145 feet. This record was immediately broken by Kentucky Kingdom's Chang in 1997, before again being broken by Six Flags Magic Mountain's Riddler's Revenge in 98. B&M's follow-up to Kumba was Port Aventura's Dragon Con, a ride not notable for its height or speed, but for its record-breaking 8 inversions, a mark that stood until 2002. While the modern steel roller coaster continued to evolve during the 1990s, the popularity of old-school wooden coasters did not wane, igniting a separate coaster war of sorts as new wooden coaster manufacturers competed to become the top player in the industry. Chapter 4: The Wooden Coaster Front. We last left off at a turning point in wooden coaster history. The 1970s saw the most prolific wooden coaster builder of all time, the Philadelphia Toboggan Company, cease designing coasters, and designers and firms scrambled to fill in the wooden coaster-sized gap for the next decade. Arguably the most successful was the coaster-creating duo of Charles Dinn, the man who built Kings Island's The Beast, and Curtis Summers, a designer who worked with different coaster builders in the early 80s. They joined forces in the mid-80s as the Dinn Corporation, constructing massive woodies like Hercules at Dorney Park and the Texas Giant at Six Flags Over Texas. As the new decade began, the Dinn Corporation showed no signs of slowing down. Along with the Texas Giant, 1990 saw them open 3 other major wooden coasters: Six Flags Over Georgia's Georgia Cyclone, Darien Lake's Predator, and Kentucky Kingdom's Thunder Run. 1991 was shaping up to be another great year for the company. Not only did they open Cyclone at Six Flags Magic Mountain and Mean Streak at Cedar Point, which opened as the world's tallest wooden roller coaster at 155 feet, but they were also working on their first project outside of North America, building and designing Pegasus for Efteling. Rumor has it, during the construction of Pegasus, a dispute occurred between Charles Dinn and the park, and after a strike, The ride's work was taken over by Intamin, the company of American Eagle fame. In a shocking move, very soon after this incident, Charles Dinh retired, and the Dinh Corporation was dissolved. As for Curtis Summers, he designed one final coaster before his death in 1992, the Intamin-built Jupiter at Kijima-Kogen in Japan, which you may recognize from its brief appearance in the 1994 kaiju film Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla. Just like that, the PTC-sized hole was vacant again, but it wouldn't remain so for very long. Enter the Roller Coaster Corporation of America, or RCCA, whose first coaster was the record-breaking Rattler at Six Flags Fiesta Texas. Opening in 1992, it smashed Mean Streak's height and speed records, 172 feet tall with a 166-foot first drop and a top speed of over 70 miles per hour. But it originally wasn't supposed to. The park owners coerced the ride's designer, John Pierce, to alter the ride's original design to surpass the height and speed records held by their corporate rival up north. The result was a coaster with brutal transitions and roughness, so brutal in fact that the ride was aggressively reprofiled over the years. In 1994, the ride's first drop was shortened by an insane 42 feet, allowing Mean Streak to regain its two height records. After the failure of the Rattler, it became clear that RCCA was not the company to take over PTC as the world's foremost wooden coaster creator. But with Charles Dinh out of the picture, who was there to turn to? Enter Denise Dinh, daughter of Charles Dinh and the first woman to appear in the series since Catherine the Great in episode 1. Together with her brother and husband, she formed Custom Coasters Incorporated, or CCI for short, bringing many of the designers from the old Dinh Corporation along with her. Unlike RCCA, who debuted with a massive record-breaking coaster at a major park, CCI was focused on offering smaller-scale, affordable wooden coasters to smaller family-run parks. Their first installation was the family coaster Sky Princess, today named Kingdom Coaster, at Dutch Wonderland in Pennsylvania. Their second coaster, Outlaw at Adventureland in Iowa, entered thrill coaster territory. The ride was designed by a freelance designer named Mike Boodley and turned heads for its curved drops and twisted layout. But CCI really rose to prominence in 1995 when they debuted the Raven at a small park named Holiday World in Santa Claus, Indiana. Standing only 80 feet tall and with a top speed of less than 50 miles per hour, the Raven didn't break any records, but it did earn a spot on many riders' top 10 lists, with praise directed at its unique, low-to-the-ground, fast-paced layout through the woods. In fact, Amusement Today awarded the Raven the title of Best Wooden Coaster 4 years in a row, and was commonly considered one of the world's top 10 wooden coasters on the planet for over a decade after its opening. 1996 saw CCI open 5 major coasters, including their first installation outside the US, Oakwood Theme Park's Megaphobia, which not only was hailed as one of the best wood coasters in the world, but caused the I in CCI to change from Incorporated to International. CCI was really on a roll, and played a big part in transforming smaller, lesser-known parks into major amusement destinations in the early to mid-90s, and incredibly, their wooden coaster dominance was mostly unchallenged. But in 1996, a new manufacturer came onto the scene, and their debut coaster was a standout. Located at Pennsylvania's Hershey Park, the Wildcat was a true twister, with a layout that harked back to the legendary coasters of the 1920s Golden Age. Its layout may also remind you of another coaster we've seen, and that's no coincidence. You see, Wildcat was built by Great Coasters International, or GCI, a company founded by Claire Hayne Jr. and Mike Boodley, the very man who designed Outlaw for CCI just 3 years prior. Mike Boodley's design for Wildcat, with its twisted drops and swooping curves, carried a certain uniqueness, while at the same time was very obviously inspired by the rides built by turn-of-the-century designer Frederick Church. This modern take on a Golden Age classic made the industry stand up and take notice. 2 years later, GCI debuted their sophomore coaster, named Roar at Six Flags America, to similar acclaim. While these rides' layouts were designed by GCI, their trains were provided by our friends over at Philadelphia Toboggan Coasters, who despite dropping out of the coaster design business, continue to manufacture coaster trains. In 1999 that would change, as GCI unveiled their own custom-built rolling stock. Named the Millennium Flyers, these articulated trains contain single-bench cars, allowing them to better navigate Mike Boodley's twisted layouts. While their name is a nod to the famous Century Flyer trains built by National Amusement Device, their design resembles the Bob's trains created by none other than Frederick Church. These trains were first installed on Six Flags Discovery Kingdom's GCI, confusingly also named Roar, and have since become a signature feature of GCI coasters. Chapter 5: The Launch Coaster Front. While the record-breaking steel behemoths and new takes on Golden Age classic Woodies couldn't seem more different, there is one crucial thing that they had in common. They all used chain lifts to carry their trains to the highest point in the course. In fact, as coaster technology continued to evolve, the chain lift was one of the few elements of coaster design that remained constant. Sure, a few manufacturers used simple launch systems on their shuttle coasters in the 70s and 80s, but the idea of launching trains into a full-fledged layout never really caught steam. That is until the mid to late 90s, when the introduction of cutting-edge electromagnetic propulsion technology completely revolutionized the steel coaster industry. After years of development and experimentation in the passenger train field, electromagnetic linear accelerators first appeared on a roller coaster in 1996, when Kings Island and Kings Dominion, who both had been purchased by Paramount at this point, opened the twin coasters named the Outer Limits Flight of Fear. Constructed by the brand new American manufacturing firm Premier Rides, trains were blasted out of the station from 0 to 54 miles per hour in just 4 seconds. Premier accomplished this through the use of something called linear induction motors, or LIMs. Essentially, LIMs function via a pair of electromagnets placed on the side of or on top of the track, with a small gap between them. A current is applied to this pair of magnets, creating an electromagnetic field. When fins located on the train pass between these pairs of magnets, a second magnetic field is created that opposes the original field, causing trains to accelerate. While some enthusiasts were originally put off by LIMs, preferring the anticipation-building ascent of traditional lift hills, the benefits of electromagnetic propulsion technology were undeniable. Not only did LIMs contain no moving parts, making them virtually maintenance-free, but they removed the need for large, space-consuming lift hills, allowing greater flexibility in coaster layouts. Premier followed up their Outer Limits themed rides with 3 Batman themed installations at multiple Six Flags parks in 1998, all featuring an LIM launch, proving themselves to be a key player in the industry. But their stranglehold over electromagnetic propulsion technology wouldn't last long. While Premier was perfecting their use of linear induction motors, Intamin, a ride manufacturer whose name we've seen pop up here and there over the past few episodes, was tinkering with a different form of magnetic propulsion technology. Named linear synchronous motors, or LSMs, the idea is similar to LIMs with a few key differences. On LSM launches, a row of magnets are placed on the ride's launch track, with a large permanent magnet placed on the ride's train. The magnets on the track are calibrated to have a slightly offset magnetic field compared to the permanent magnet, with the resulting attraction and repulsion forces essentially causing the train to ride the current forward. Not only is this process more efficient than the LIM launches, resulting in less wasted energy and requiring less power to run, but the process can also be reversed, meaning LSMs can be used to brake coaster trains, something we'll see implemented in the next video. The one downside to LSMs is that they require extreme precision to work properly, and therefore are more expensive and require more complex control systems. Unlike Premier, whose Flight of Fear prototypes aptly showcase the technology without going overboard, Intamin took the idea of an electromagnetic launch to the extreme on their very first attempt, a mentality that we'll see come to define Intamin's approach to coaster design over the years. The ride would be located at Six Flags Magic Mountain, who wanted to take the speed record away from Kennywood and Steel Phantom. Eventually, they determined that simply having the fastest coaster on the planet wouldn't be enough. They wanted it to be the first coaster to reach 100 miles per hour. Construction began in 1995, with the ride set to open in June of 1996. But troubles with the brand new launch system delayed the ride's opening for almost a year. Finally, in March of 1997, Superman the Escape opened to the public. The ride was not a traditional coaster by any means. Riders were launched out of the station on a section of straight track, from 0 to 100 miles per hour in 7 seconds, before climbing up a massive 415-foot vertical tower. From here, riders would fall backwards down the tower and coast back to the station. Hilariously, due to its delay, another Intamin-built reverse freefall coaster opened a month earlier in Australia, so Magic Mountain cannot truthfully claim that it opened the first coaster to ever hit 100 miles per hour, but Intamin could, and while these rides weren't praised as being great coasters per se, the outrageousness of the ride experience rightfully garnered attention and praise. The humble Swiss firm Intamin had firmly entered the coaster wars, and with it, everything would change.